Trump's Epstein problem just got way worse, with a now panicked Trump White House making denials as the Epstein birthday book ended up exposing even more than expected. More information is expected soon, and Masih and Khanna should have the votes for the Epstein files by the end of the month. Also, Israel just struck Qatar in an attempt to assassinate Hamas leaders as top leaders gathered to discuss Trump's ceasefire proposal. And you've got at least 19 protesters dead, parliament on fire, and the prime minister resigning as the Gen Z protests rage in Nepal. We're talking about all of that and even more on today's brand new Philip DeFranco show. You daily dive into the news, starting with this. We've got to talk about the now infamous Epstein birthday book because it's been released and it's actually way worse than we previously thought. Because back in July, you had the Wall Street Journal reporting, though not publishing the actual thing, that Trump had contributed a letter to Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday book in 2003. With it said that it contained a drawing of a naked woman whose pubic hair is Trump's signature, as well as an imaginary dialogue between Trump and Epstein, something that was very weird and creepy sounding. Trump supposedly writing that they have a lot in common and then adding, "Enigmas never age. Have you noticed that?" And ending, "A pal is a wonderful thing. Happy birthday, and may every day be another wonderful secret." Right? And in response to it, Trump calling the whole thing fake and then suing the journal's reporters, its publisher, and its parent company, News Corp, for defamation. And you had many, including J.D. Vance, so I think he asked it rhetorically, asking, where is this letter? And well, now the letter's here, along with the rest of the 238-page birthday book, because the House Oversight Committee got it from Epstein's estate and released it last night. And so now we know this letter, it very, very much exists, but still you had Trump allies denying that it's authentic. You had Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt saying, as I have said all along, it's very clear President Trump did not draw this picture and he did not sign it. President Trump's legal team will continue to aggressively pursue litigation, and adding, this is fake news to perpetuate the Democrat Epstein hoax. You then also had the likes of Charlie Kirk, Benny Johnson, and the White House Deputy Chief of Staff posting other examples of Trump's signature, claiming that they look different. But as many have pointed out, the signature in the letter, it bears many hallmarks of Trump's actual signature. The bold serif lettering, the loopier cursive, the long tail at the end, and the final D. There are even some side-by-side examples of known signatures from Trump, as well as this one from the birthday book. The one, you have Trump defenders using examples of his signature where he doesn't do the long tail. And two, you've got folks like Republican Representative Tim Burchett claiming that, this could just be an outright forgery.
I mean, anybody can do a signature. We've seen the auto pen's been used quite a bit with the Biden administration. So I've never known Trump to be much of an artist either. I just don't buy it.
So you think really someone might have just forged this somehow and sent this to the
somehow. It's so easy to do. I just don't buy any of it.
But then with all that, you had people pushing back, saying it would be very strange and weird and seemingly unnecessary for Epstein's own estate, and therefore Epstein himself, when he was alive, to have a fake letter from Trump in his birthday book. Right? Of course, you've also had Trump attacking the credibility of the lewd drawing, with him saying in July,
I don't do drawings. I'm not a drawing person. I don't do drawings of women. That I can tell you.
And then you had his son Eric reiterating that claim yesterday.
I can tell you my father does not sketch out cartoon drawings.
But as is public knowledge, and as others have pointed out, Trump did draw pictures around that same time, which he actually auctioned off for charity, and their style is remarkably similar to the one in the letter. And once again, here they are, side by side for comparison. But that's also not where it ends. Even seemingly where he refers to himself in the third person in the letter's imaginary dialogue, it resembles his speeches and social media posts.
Nobody would be tougher on ISIS than Donald Trump. If Putin likes Donald Trump, you wouldn't even be hearing about the word immigration if it wasn't for Donald Trump. Trump was able to get him to give something. I don't know what the hell it was, but it doesn't matter. Then Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Donald Trump.
Right, and then there's stuff like his distinctive vocab, right? You had people out there going, the president would never use the word enigma. But in fact, he used it to describe Don King, Mike Tyson, and Dan Rather in his books. And then you have things like the letter's phrase, a wonderful thing. It's something that Trump uses frequently.
It's going to be a wonderful thing. It's going to be wonderful for the Middle East. And it was a wonderful thing. It's been a wonderful thing.
But also, a thing that I think should be focused on all this is the stuff outside of just Trump's letter. What we're seeing is that the birthday book contains much, much more that is very revealing. Or something you've seen more and more people honing in on is this one from a businessman and longtime Mar-a-Lago member, Joel Pashkow, because it shows Epstein receiving an oversized check for $22,500 with Trump's name on it, with the caption, Jeffrey showing early talents with money and women, and then sells fully depreciated redacted name to Donald Trump. And according to the Journal, that redacted name belongs to a real person, a wealthy European woman, then in her 20s. So the drawing apparently is meant to show Trump purchasing a woman from Epstein. The sources also saying that she was courted by both Trump and Epstein in the 1990s, but then when she ultimately went for Trump, Epstein felt bitter. Though I will say the woman's lawyer claims she had no romantic relationship with either man, severed ties with Epstein in 1997, and doesn't know Pashkow and has no knowledge of the birthday letter. But then also, there are dozens of other letters in this book, and though most don't mention Trump outside of a brief comment that he was one of the many famous people that they met through Epstein, they do demonstrate, in the words of the New York Times, that Epstein's lewd and lecherous behavior with young women was both widely known and widely celebrated by people who describe themselves as his closest friends and associates. So you've got things like like a cartoon drawing of Epstein lying in a beach chair, getting what appears to be a nude massage at least from 4 topless women. There's also another comparing him to the fisherman from a Hemingway story, except instead of catching fish, he catches women, blonde, red, or brunette. He then had another lamenting so many girls, so little time about Epstein. He also had one that reminisced about how in a farm town in Iowa where it was hard to tell the difference between the girls and the hogs, Epstein somehow managed to find a spectacular tall blonde whom he later invited back with him to New York. He then had another letter where the person said they agonized long and hard about what to write and then simply put photos of lions and zebras having sex and adding that they seemed more appropriate than anything I could put in words. And next you have a letter alluding to how in the mid-1970s Epstein first discovered the Maxwell teenage daughter. And then finally you had one letter marveling at the fact that somehow at the age of 50, Epstein has avoided the penitentiary. So y'all can draw your own conclusions from all that, but arguably these letters show that even 3 years before his first arrest, Epstein's reputation for being at least a womanizer and at worst a sex pest with a fixation on very young girls, it was widely known among his friends. As far as Trump's take on this, when NBC got him on the phone this morning, he reportedly said, "I don't comment on something that's a dead issue. I gave all comments to the staff. It's a dead issue." And you had JD Vance saying much of the same, posting on X, "Democrats don't care about Epstein. They don't even care about his victims. That's why they were silent about it for years. The only thing they care about is concocting another fake scandal like Russiagate to smear President Trump with lies. No one is falling for this BS." But also, and maybe unfortunately for Trump, this appears to be only the beginning, right? Because the House Oversight Committee got more than just the birthday book from Epstein's estate. They also now have his will, his 2007 non-prosecution agreement, right? That sweetheart plea deal that he got, and almost 30 years of entries in his personal address book. With that, I will note that the estate's lawyers told the committee, "We are not aware of the existence of a list of clients involved in sex acts, or sex trafficking facilitated by Mr. Jeffrey Epstein." And so for now, we're gonna have to see, what we have to work with here and wait to see if the House obtains more evidence. Which, actually, we need to mention this, the committee still hasn't received a second batch of documents from Trump's DOJ, despite the deadline to comply with its subpoena for the full Epstein files coming and going weeks ago. And all of this is, despite having several of Epstein's victims coming to Capitol Hill last week and demanding that Trump release the files, no more Republicans have signed on to Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie's discharge petition. So there's still just 2 lawmakers short of getting it passed in the House, with Massey himself, Nancy Mace, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and Lauren Boebert being the only ones to join Democrats. But also, I'll add there that the votes in the House are very likely going to change soon, because the Democrats have vacant seats because their politicians died, and those seats are going to be filled soon. That also doesn't mean it's a dumb deal. The White House might be able to work with or pressure one of the Republicans who says they will vote for it, and maybe they change their mind. Something we often see in Congress is people feeling like, oh, I can vote against this because they know it's not going to actually have an impact. But soon, when the reality on the ground changes, maybe their vote does as well. But for now, we'll have to wait to see, and it really does look like Mike Johnson and Trump might be in a bind here. But then quickly, in a 1-minute break that helps keep the show free, let me say it's time. It is time for you to get out there, especially because we've been giving out $500 every week for over a year thanks to our sponsor at SeatGeek, and somehow some of y'all still haven't entered, which is crazy because it's free. And the lineup right now is stacked. Billie Eilish, Luke Bryan, The Lumineers, Benson Boone, Lorde, Hozier. I know I've got some games I'm gonna be going to on Sundays. And it's been awesome seeing so many of you winning the $500 SeatGeek weekly giveaway and using it to hit up concerts, games, Broadway shows. Y'all just living your best lives. And if you haven't entered yet, it takes 2 seconds and next week's $500 winner could be you. Because for the uninitiated, SeatGeek is the #1 rated ticketing app with over 28 million downloads and tickets to over 70,000 events, sports, music, comedy, theater, you name it. And so for the first timers, you download the app, scan the QR code, or hit that link in the description, and use code Phil for $20 off your first ticket purchase. And then, and this is key for everyone, add code PDS to your SeatGeek account as well. That gets you $10 off any ticket and enters you for your chance to win the weekly $500 giveaway, no purchase required. So if you've used SeatGeek before, right, you're a SeatGeek vet, that applies to you as well. So just add code PDS to your account and you're entered. So hey, scan that QR code or click the link below and use code Phil and code PDS and go make some memories. But then next up in the news, we got to talk about how apparently the best way to avoid getting punished for drinking and driving is just be a cop. That or, not drinking and driving. Because what we're seeing from this investigation from the New York Times and the nonprofit newsroom New York Focus, it is shocking. Over the past 2 years, they got over 10,000 previously confidential disciplinary files detailing misconduct at roughly half the state's law enforcement agencies. And what they found is that some New York police departments have caught officers drinking and driving, and then they protected them from the punishments that you or I would face. Right? Because if you're not a cop and you're caught driving while intoxicated in New York, you're looking at like losing your license for at least 6 months. You'll face nearly $1,000 in fines, and you could even go to jail up to a year. And that's for a first-time offense. All that said, I'm imagining you're hearing this and you're going, well, it's not a surprise that officers give their brothers in blue special treatment. They even had a former police chief saying on the record, if I go 85 on the freeway, I'm not going to get a ticket. And saying, have I let people go occasionally? Of course, we all have. But that guy, as well as other former police chiefs and officers, were reportedly surprised that even officers responsible for crashes had avoided arrest. Right? According to this investigation, officers have collided with guardrails, parked cars, and even a moving police car with its lights on. And then some have fled the scenes of accidents. Some have even shown up to work under the influence, one to a police station, another to a fire, a third to a crime scene. Officer Vincent Del Forte, for example, admitted to having 9 drinks before attending a basketball game, then a few more beers during the game, more drinks at 2 bars on the way home, and 3 more at his house before going to bed. And then he drove to work work the next morning and tested above the legal limit, but was never charged. He just got suspended for 3 days and breath tested every shift for 6 months. And then this guy, Ronald Wilson, 11 p.m. on a Saturday night, he crashes his BMW into a Jeep with a responding officer, noting that Wilson's speech was slurred and he was off balance, his eyes were glassy, and he reeked of alcohol. But then Wilson showed ID, proving that he was an investigator with the state police, and the officer just never gave him a sobriety test. Wilson even admitted in an affidavit that he had been behind the wheel and later admitted that he had 6 cocktails and a shot that night, but all he ended up getting was a traffic ticket for following behind another car too closely, and he got suspended without pay for 35 days. And just the damn cherry on top of this situation, the cop who responded to the scene of this crash, Andrew Kowalski, in June, he won the Erie County's DWI Enforcement Award. Right, and overall, this investigation found numerous cases of just cops not taking even the most basic steps to confirm if their fellow officers had driven drunk, despite significant indications that they had. And then, even with a few exceptions, those who had been caught all returned to the job following short suspensions. Right, and a big thing that I want to end on is the problem is very likely much bigger than even what we know here. We've got some experts saying that the documented cases were very likely an undercount, suggesting that many drunk driving incidents were never internally investigated. Though I will say, to be fair, on the flip side of this, not every department failed to criminally investigate incidents of drunken driving, and officers who seriously injured themselves or others, they usually face prosecution. That said, that feels like an incredibly fucking low bar. It's something even the most flexible of us couldn't limbo under, and it's still incredibly alarming that officers can put other people's lives at risk in this way and avoid any real consequences. Not to mention, it raises the question of what other types of misconduct are just being swept under the rug every single day. But then next up in the news from that, we've got to talk about how the Supreme Court just gave the green light for racial profiling. Because the case in question here, it centered around the aggressive immigration enforcement efforts in LA that have been a key part of Trump's crackdown. And at this point, you've probably seen at least some of the countless videos circulating the internet in recent months showing armed federal agents rounding up Hispanic people in LA, and even those who are US citizens. Or with many saying that these agents are just acting as rove bands of masked officers routinely violating the Constitution, though you have supporters arguing that this is a part of Trump's administration's vigorous but entirely legal campaign to enforce immigration laws. But regardless of your opinion here or what you call it, the situation led to civil rights groups and several individuals filing a lawsuit against the Trump administration. We're describing what was happening as indiscriminate immigration operations and saying that when they had swept up thousands of day laborers, car wash workers, farm workers, caregivers, and more, the administration was violating these people's Fourth Amendment protections against unreasonable searches and seizures. Saying, quote, individuals with brown skin are approached and pulled aside by unidentified federal agents suddenly and with a show of force and made to answer questions about who they are and where they are from. And so then what you saw in response to the suit was a U.S. District Court judge from Central California placing some hefty restrictions on immigration agents, ordering them to not rely on factors including race or ethnicity, speaking Spanish or accented English, presence at a particular location like a day laborer site or an agriculture site, or performing a particular type of work. With the judge saying that these factors shouldn't be used alone or actually in any combination in deciding who to stop within her jurisdiction, though the Trump administration took the issue to the Supreme Court. Right? And they argued that the restrictions were hurting their ability to handle the illegal immigration problem, and they said that the stops made by federal agents were lawful. And what we saw yesterday is that the Supreme Court agreed, ruling 6-3 along party lines. And so they lifted those restrictions and offered really no explanation, with really the only one providing any sort of context or thought behind the court's judgment being Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who wrote in a separate concurring opinion that those 4 factors that the lower court judge excluded can play a role in determining who they need to stop. With Kavanaugh saying that while apparent ethnicity itself is not a reason to stop someone, that combined with other factors can be a relevant consideration. And he also went on to defend the LA immigration crackdown in general, writing about 10% of the people in the Los Angeles region are illegally in the United States, meaning about 2 million illegal immigrants out of a total population of 20 million. Right, but then on the other side, you had Justice Sonia Sotomayor and the 2 other liberal justices dissenting, with Sotomayor saying that with this ruling, the court and the administration, quote, all but declared that all Latinos, U.S. citizens or not, who work low-wage jobs are fair game to be seized at any time, taken away from work, and held until they provide proof of their legal status to the agents' satisfaction. And adding, countless people in the Los Angeles area have been grabbed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed simply because of their looks, their accents, and the fact that they make a living by doing manual labor. Today, the court needlessly subjects countless more to these exact same indignities, and saying rather than stand idly by while our constitutional freedoms are lost, I dissent. And as you can imagine, this ruling has prompted a lot of reactions, including some grave warnings from experts. You've got people like Armando Gudino, the executive director of the Los Angeles Worker Center Network nonprofit, who echoed Justice Sotomayor in an interview with The Guardian and said they have effectively legalized racial profiling and by extension, racial discrimination. And others adding that this ruling sends a specific message to Latino Americans and non-citizens, saying our Constitution is very clear in that it applies to all persons living in the United States as being entitled to civil rights. Unless you decide we are not people, you are saying we don't have rights in this country, citizen or non-citizen. And also had the likes of Gavin Newsom saying Trump's handpicked Supreme Court majority just became the grand marshal for a parade of racial terror in Los Angeles. And then LA Mayor Karen Bass agreeing with Sotomayor and saying that LA is just the beginning, saying that her city is being used as, quote, a test case for total dominance and unchecked power by the federal government. Though, of course, as you have all of that, you